Picture this. It's the 1700s, a time when the streets of England are bustling with horse-drawn carriages, merchants hawking their wares, and the air is thick with the scent of coal smoke and, well, not much else. England's rocking some seriously extravagant powdered wigs, fancy coats, and let's be honest, some pretty questionable hygiene habits. Bathing was more of a suggestion than a routine, and perfume was everyone's best friend. But beneath all that powdered elegance, there's a real problem brewing. Prisons are absolutely jam-packed. We're talking wall-to-wall people, crammed together so tightly it's hard to tell where one prisoner ends and the next begins. Imagine the worst rush-hour subway, but with less fresh air, and a lot more chains. Why were these prisons so full? Well, the justice system had a knack for dishing out harsh sentences for even the tiniest crimes. Steal a loaf of bread to feed your family? That's a one-way ticket to jail, no questions asked. Petty theft, pickpocketing, or even just being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Boom! Off to the slammer! The prisons quickly filled up with people who'd committed the smallest of offenses. The English justice system was basically playing a real-life game of how many convicts can we cram into a tiny, disease-ridden cell. Spoiler alert, it wasn't pretty. These places were breeding grounds for sickness with barely enough space to lie down, let alone breathe. The lockups were so miserable they made your average budget airline middle seat seem like first-class luxury. Prisoners slept in shifts, stacked on top of each other, and privacy was a distant dream. Something had to give. Building bigger prisons was an option, but it was expensive and slow. The government needed a faster fix, and the public was getting restless about the growing criminal population. With their jails overflowing like a bad pint of ale, the Brits needed a new dumping ground, preferably one far, far away from polite society. Enter Australia, stage left, a distant land that would soon become the ultimate solution to England's prison problem. Now you might be wondering, why Australia? Of all the places in the world, why did the British choose this vast, distant, and mostly unknown land at the edge of the map? It's not like Australia was a popular destination or even a place most people in England could point to on a globe. I mean, it wasn't exactly on everyone's travel bucket list back then. In fact, for most people, the idea of going to Australia was more of a nightmare than a dream vacation. It was mysterious, wild, and unimaginably far away, a place shrouded in myth and rumor, with stories of strange animals and endless deserts. Let's be real, chucking convicts on a boat to the other side of the world seemed like a pretty good deal to the Brits. Out of sight, out of mind, right? The British government was facing a crisis. Their prisons were overflowing, crime was on the rise, and there was nowhere left to send the growing number of convicts. America, their previous dumping ground, was now off limits after the revolution. Plus, there was this whole terra nullius thing, which basically meant they thought Australia was up for grabs. The British declared the land legally empty, ignoring the people who had called it home for tens of thousands of years. To them, it was a blank slate, a place to start over, or, more accurately, to send over those they wanted to forget. Never mind the fact that Aboriginal people had been living there for, about 65,000 years. Their rich cultures, traditions, and histories were simply brushed aside by British officials eager to solve their own problems. The land was anything but empty, but that didn't fit the narrative the British wanted to tell. It's a classic case of finders keepers, but without the finders actually finding anything. The British claimed ownership without discovery, planting their flag and declaring dominion over a continent they barely understood, all while ignoring the people who already lived there. So in 1786, the British Parliament did what any sensible government on the verge of a prison population meltdown would do. They passed a law. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and the idea of shipping convicts halfway around the world suddenly seemed like the perfect solution. This law officially declared Australia as a penal colony. With a few signatures and some official stamps, the fate of an entire continent and thousands of people was changed forever. Think of it as one giant timeout corner for the empire's naughtiest subjects. Instead of a slap on the wrist, convicts were given a one-way ticket to the other side of the planet, to a place most had never even heard of. With a stroke of a quill, Australia's fate was sealed. The decision was made in the comfort of Parliament, far from the harsh realities awaiting those who would soon call Australia home. It was about to become the new home for Britain's biggest export, convicted criminals. The journey would be long, dangerous, and uncertain, but for the British government, it was the perfect solution to a growing problem. In 1787, 11 ships known as the First Fleet set sail from England with over 1,000 convicts and a few hundred free settlers. Let's just say this wasn't your typical Caribbean cruise. Think cramped quarters, questionable food, and the constant threat of scurvy. Oh, and did I mention rats? Lots and lots of rats. The journey itself took about 8 months, which is longer than it takes to binge-watch every season of Game of Thrones, twice. By the time they arrived in Botany Bay, everyone was probably ready to kiss the ground, even if it meant dealing with the local wildlife. Imagine the scene-seasick convicts stumbling off the boats, blinking in the unfamiliar sunshine, probably wondering what they'd gotten themselves into. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of their Australian adventure. So you're a convict in Australia. What's on the agenda? Well, first off, forget any ideas of a tropical holiday. The reality was a world away from palm trees and relaxation. You'd wake up to the sound of guards barking orders, and your day would be mapped out for you, every grueling minute of it. Well, let's just say it wasn't all sunshine and shrimp on the Barbie. Life was tough. Think back-breaking labor, harsh punishments, and a daily grind that left little room for hope. Convicts were often forced to work from sunrise to sunset, swinging heavy tools, breaking rocks, or digging ditches under the relentless Australian sun. And if the work didn't get you, the land itself might. The ever-present threat of getting eaten by something venomous, snakes, spiders, and all sorts of creepy crawlies, was just part of daily life. The Australian wilderness was as much a prison as the colony itself. Convicts were put to work building roads, clearing land, and constructing the very foundations of what would become modern Australia. Every stone laid and tree felled was done by hand, with primitive tools and little rest. They hacked through dense bush, drained swamps, and tried to make this new land feel a little less, well, new. It was a never-ending battle against nature, and progress was slow and exhausting. It was basically like a giant government-sponsored construction project, only with a lot more sweat, blisters, and very little choice in the matter. There were no safety regulations, no unions, and no one to complain to if you got hurt. Injuries were common, and medical care was basic at best. And if you stepped out of line, you could expect a lot more floggings. Punishments were brutal and public, meant to keep everyone in check. But hey, it wasn't all bad. There were rare moments of camaraderie. Convicts sharing a joke or a brief rest, finding small ways to keep their spirits up. Some convicts, after they'd served their sentences, were given a second chance. They could earn their freedom and with it, a new start in this strange land. Many managed to turn their lives around. They got land, started families, and worked hard to build a future for themselves and their children. Some even became, dare I say it, respectable members of society, business owners, farmers, and community leaders. Their pasts faded as new towns grew. Who knew hard labor and the fear of spider bites could be so motivating? The threat of danger and the hope of freedom pushed many to survive and even thrive. For the guards and free settlers, life was a bit easier, but not by much. They had more freedom, but also more responsibility. They still had to carve out a living in a land that was wild, unpredictable, and often unforgiving. Supplies were scarce and isolation was real. The environment threw everything it had at them: droughts, floods, storms, and the constant challenge of surviving so far from home. Plus, there was always the fear of convict uprisings, simmering tensions that could boil over at any moment. Which, let's be honest, sounds like a terrible party you wouldn't want to get caught in. Life down under was tough for everyone, but it was also the beginning of something entirely new. Now, it's important to remember that while all this was going on, Aboriginal people were trying to live their lives, as they had been for millennia. The arrival of the British, to put it mildly, threw a bit of a spanner in the works. Imagine having your land taken away, your culture threatened, and your way of life completely upended. That was the reality for Indigenous Australians. The arrival of the First Fleet marked the beginning of a dark chapter in their history, one filled with dispossession, violence, and injustice. It's a side of the story that's often overlooked, but it's crucial to understanding the full impact of Australia's penal colony origins. So how did Australia go from being a giant open-air prison to the awesome country it is today? Well, it was a long and winding road, mate. As more and more free settlers arrived, the balance of power began to shift. The discovery of gold in the 1850s brought a massive influx of people and wealth, which helped to fuel economic growth and development. Gradually, Australia shed its convict past and emerged as a self-governing nation. They even apologized for the whole stealing Aboriginal land and mistreating its people thing, which, is a good start. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit that a nation founded on such harsh beginnings could transform itself into a place known for its laid-back attitude, stunning landscapes, and of course, deadly creatures. Today, Australia is a thriving, multicultural nation with a rich history and a bright future. It's a place where you can find everything from bustling cities to rugged outback adventures, and where the coffee is strong, the beaches are beautiful, and the wildlife will try to kill you, but in a good way mostly. So, next time you're down under, sipping a flat white and watching a kangaroo hop by, take a moment to remember its wild and wacky past. From penal colony to global powerhouse, Australia's journey is a reminder that even from the most unlikely of beginnings, something truly remarkable can emerge. Just watch out for the spiders.